Hello and welcome to day one of the Dominion Menagerie set previews. If you're watching this video, you probably already know all about this, but in case you don't, for at least the past set, maybe the past couple sets, Donald X, the creator of Dominion, has been releasing previews of cards in upcoming expansions before the expansions themselves actually drop. And you can play with the previewed cards each day on the Dominion client, so go check that out if you're interested. Today is the first day of previews for the Menagerie set, and the 5 cards you see here are the cards being previewed for today. So I'm going to just do some off-the-cuff do an off-the-cuff look at the cards, just talk about what I think about them, and I plan to do this for each of the preview days after this one as well. So first up, Snowy Village, +1 card, +4 actions, +1 buy. Ignore any further plus actions you get this turn. This actually reminds me of some cards from Slay the Spire, which I've started playing recently. So there's a couple different cards in there that do things like, you draw some and then you can't draw anymore, or you play something and then you can't play any more cards, and things of that nature. I kind of wonder whether this was inspired by that or not. But either way, it's certainly a different sort of card than we've had in Dominion before in terms of that restriction, which I think is pretty cool. As a 3 cost, it looks pretty strong. Certainly, if you took away that constraint, it would be incredibly strong. It'd be just absolutely busted. But even with that constraint, the addition of the plus buy on it, I think, has the potential to make it very strong in a lot of cases. There are certainly going to be boards where that restriction really cripples you, because something to note here that may not be intuitively obvious is that plus actions doesn't just mean, oh, I can't play other villages and get plus actions from it. It means, like, if I play a lab after this, then I don't get plus actions for that. It means I can't spend villagers, things of that nature. There are other ways to get more plus actions, in the sense that, like, to increase your terminal space, like throne room variants, basically, or other cards that have like conditional on play effects, like Imp. But in general, your terminal space, once you play this, is going to be constrained to 5 additional cards plus whatever actions you have left, you had additional coming into this before playing it, and then and also all of the cards that you play are terminal. Even Champion basically gets countered by this, which is interesting. So that being said, 5 is a lot of terminals, actually. So, on a board where most of the cards aren't giving plus action, or none of the cards are giving plus action anyway, again, this seems really good. Like, if you have a board with Snowy Village and some terminal draw, like, hey, now you've got the ability to play some of that terminal draw non-terminally. You've got a plus buy to help you build. Like, that's really good. If you have a board with a lot of cantrips, you don't want to play this before you play the cantrips. But if you basically have a situation where you have a lot of non-terminal draw, but then you want to play terminal payload, you can play the Snowy Village at the end and use that to play your terminal payload. And of course, with the +1 buy, it provides a little bit of that payload itself. So, I think this card is definitely going to be a skill test card in terms of when it's good and how to play it effectively, but I definitely think it's a strong card. And I think, like, I anticipate that people are going to be scared of it at times. I anticipate that I will be one of those people, but I think that overall, it's going to be worth getting on most boards that it appears on, probably. And yeah, and I think it's going to be quite strong. So next up we have Sheepdog, +2 cards, and its reaction: when you gain a card, you may play this from your hand. So obviously, on some boards, this is going to be, well, maybe that's not so obvious. On some boards, I want to say that this is going to be really weak. So if you ignore the reaction, which you shouldn't because that's the most important part about the card, but just for evaluation of the rest of it, as a 3 cost that draws you 2 cards and does nothing else, it's terrible. I mean, that's like significantly worse than Moat, which is not a strong card. So you really need the reaction to be doing something in order for this to ever be worth getting. And then so the question becomes, how often is that going to happen? And I think the answer is often. I think it's going to happen a lot. I don't really have a good sense of how often. So obviously, if you have Sheepdog and you gain a card, like even just from buying it, you still trigger the effect. But in general, buying something is not when you care about triggering the effect, because once you started buying things, you can't play additional coins in most cases. So I think for the most part, this is going to be relevant in 2 situations. One is when you have gainers in your deck, and the other is when your opponent is junking you, or otherwise causing you to gain stuff. I don't really know. I can't think of an example off the top of my head of your opponent is causing you to gain stuff in a way that isn't being that isn't junking you. I guess like Messenger or something like that. But anyway, the point is, yeah. So if your opponent is junking you, this is actually quite nice because you draw those 2 cards not only non-terminally but at the start of your turn effectively, which is great. Being obviously having +2 cards, at that point it's similar to like a Den of Sin. But if you yourself are playing the gainers, that's also great because you basically got to play the Sheepdog as a lab, except that in some ways it's better than a lab because you didn't have to have the action remaining in order to play it. So like you could play a terminal, I don't know, Sculptor, gain like a silver, react with Sheepdog, draw the 2 cards, and then you can play another action if you draw one, but you don't have to, which means you could save the villager, and then you basically, your Sheepdog didn't consume the villager in order to do that. So that's really cool. I feel like the number of boards where there are like strong gainers is, it's certainly not an overwhelming number of boards. It comes up a fair amount, but I feel like there's plenty of boards where it doesn't come up. And so I think, the card could be pretty hit and miss in that respect. Although presumably if there are like weak gainers on the board, so long as Sheepdog can interact with them, that might turn them into strong gainers. But it's certainly a strong engine card because like anything, any engine that is doing like a lot of stuff is going to love having this around to be able to do even more stuff and be able to do even more gain and play stuff and all that kind of thing. One thing I'm not actually sure about is the order of operations here. So if you gain a card and you have if you've drawn your deck and you gain a card and you react with Sheepdog, it says when you gain a card. To me, that suggests that you would play the Sheepdog before you would actually put the card you gained into your discard pile. So maybe the Sheepdog itself can't actually gain and play the card that it's reacting to, but I'm not really sure about that. That seems like an important thing to find out, test out, because I think that could actually significantly affect its power level. If it can gain and play stuff in that scenario, then I think it gets quite a bit better. I still think it's going to be like, when it's strong, I think it's going to be really strong. I just think it's going to be like a low floor, high ceiling card. All right, next up we've got Animal Fair. 7 cost action, +4 coins, +1 buy per empty supply pile. And instead of paying this card's cost, you may trash an action card from your hand. So one thing I think we can definitively say about this card is that you are very, very rarely going to want to pay 7 coins for it. If you ignore the below-the-line text, this is just not worth it, in my opinion. I mean, except in situations where it's the only source of plus buy on the board, and even then, well, number one, even then you're pretty sad about it because it's just overcosted. And number two, if it's the only source of plus buy on the board, there probably won't be any empty supply piles. I mean, there could be with something like Magpie, but in general, if it's the only source of plus buy, it's going to be hard. Well, I guess, I mean, there's also gainers, of course. So, I mean, there are scenarios where it can be the only source of plus buy and yet also be a source of plus buy. But I think there's going to be a lot of cases where if it is the only source of plus buy, then it's really hard to activate the plus buy. So yeah, that's not great. However, the trash in action to gain this is something that at least I think has the potential to make the card like well, I mean, first of all, quite easy to gain under certain circumstances, and second of all, like something that you actively want to gain simply because, maybe you want to get rid of your necropolis, maybe you want to get rid of your ruins, maybe you want to get rid of your chapel. Like it's got a similarity to advance in that respect. It's basically like instead of gaining anything costing up to 6, you gain this specific card that costs 7. I would actually say, in general, I probably would prefer advance because aside from being a lot more flexible, I think usually there's going to be something on a board that you want more than this card. But still, I mean, I think having the option will definitely be nice. Like +4 money, if there are no empty supply piles, +4 money is not that exciting. But it's certainly better than a ruin, right? So, then the other question is, okay, so how often does this become really good payload by virtue of being able to empty supply piles? And that, like I said, I have some skepticism about, because I think, as I said, if it's the only plus buy in general, it's going to be difficult, and it's taking, a supply pile away from another card that could offer that plus buy. So I think it could be difficult to activate. It reminds me of City in that respect, except, of course, City needs 2 piles to empty to activate the plus buy, which is a lot more difficult of a condition to meet. But City is generally doing a little bit more for you before that happens, but then again, can be more difficult to acquire as a 5 cost rather than as a trash and action cost. I guess overall, I think, well, like one other thing before I say that, one other thing I should mention with this is that it is a really good trash for benefit card because it costs 7 and because you don't actually have to pay 7 to gain it. So, in the vein of something like Peddler, where the printed cost is disproportionate to the actual cost of acquisition, I think this card will perform very well on boards where, you know, you have something like Salvager or Apprentice that really care about how much the cards cost. But yeah, overall, I'm not sold on this one. I think it's definitely the weakest of the three that we've looked at so far. And I don't think it's a terrible card, but I think it's gonna be, I think it's like most common good use case is going to be turning action junk in your deck into money, effectively. And then if you can get plus buy on it, then that's going to be really nice. I have my doubts about how often that's going to be able to happen. But if I'm underestimating that, if it happens more often than I think it will, then the card gets a lot stronger, because plus 4 coins and plus 1 buy is really good payload. It's like Wine Merchant but stronger. And of course, it has the potential to have 2 or even 3 buys per play. Obviously, 3 buys per play only on your last turn, but or maybe a fleet turn. But still, I could see this card being really strong payload if I'm underestimating how often it's able to get the plus buy going. All right, next up, Kiln, 5 cost action, plus 2 coins. The next time you play a card this turn, you may first gain a copy of it. So the most immediate analogy in my mind is to Disciple, although obviously Disciple is quite a bit stronger because Disciple is playing the card twice in addition to gaining a copy of it. Kiln is giving you the 2 money. But one big difference is that Kiln interacts with anything, not just action cards. So if you play a treasure, you play a night card, anything you play, it can gain. It's going to be potentially tricky to play with for that reason, because you're going to have to time your play of it very precisely within your turn to manage getting the thing that you want. I can imagine how mind-bending it would be to play, Kiln on a board with something like Leprechaun or Magic Lamp, or Villa. But as a gainer, I think it has a lot of potential just because it's an unrestricted gainer in the sense of what it can gain. Well, not completely unrestricted. It can't gain most victory cards. But it's not cost restricted. So you're going to be able to do stuff like gain, King's Courts and Grand Markets and others like super powerful cards like that. Whether or not you are able to gain them non-terminally is, of course, going to be a big question. You can also use it to gain platinums. I guess you could use it to gain like a fortune if you really wanted to. I'm just trying to think of other cards that are like difficult to gain normally. City Quarter. So it has a lot of upside. I think it's like a lot of payload cards. I think it'll come down to like how good the support is. Like, although I guess it doesn't need much support to be good, because the fact that it can gain treasures means that if you're playing just like a straight money deck, you can play Kiln and then play gold and gain another gold. Like, that's pretty good. And unlike, say, Horde, you don't even need to buy a green card in order to do that. So, it seems pretty strong. It seems like maybe with the way I should put it like this. I think it has both a high floor and a high ceiling. Actually, I think you're going to want it on a lot of boards, and I think on some boards it's going to be ridiculously good. It's probably not very good in the opening the vast majority of the time, because most of the time the best you can do is gain some 2 cost, and you really don't want to be gaining copper. It is optional, so you don't have to like gain a copper or something awkward like that. If the timing is wrong, you can just treat it as terminal silver. Obviously, though, if you're playing it as terminal silver, that's for 5, that's quite bad. So you don't want to be doing that if at all possible. But you're at least not punished further for doing it, other than just the opportunity cost of not gaining something good. But yeah, I don't see this coming up in the opening very often at all. Like maybe with travelers, well, not peasant probably, because you can't play Kiln and peasant, you know, in your first shuffle. But you could play Kiln page. You know, Kiln rat catcher doesn't work either. Wait, no, none of that works because Kiln is terminal. Never mind. Okay, forget I said anything about that. Yeah, no, so this is what would actually be good in the opening. Maybe Ducat? End of the Realm? I don't know. It probably doesn't work in the opening in general. Maybe with Baker or something. But yeah, I think, okay, so, but, you know, opening with it, whatever, it's still going to be a really strong card. And I guess I didn't really talk about opening with these other cards, so let me go back and do that. Animal Fair. If you can manage to open with Animal Fair, I mean, that's pretty good. Like, it's the amount of money is probably overkill, but I mean, certainly if you want to be able to spike a price point and you can advance your Necropolis into Animal Fair, or sorry, not advance, but I mean, amounts to the same thing. If you can, if you're playing in a game with shelters, you can open with Animal Fair. Depending on what you're trying to do, that could be really nice. Are there any other circumstances under which you could even plausibly open it? Probably not. Well, somebody educates me on that, but yeah, I mean, it's not going to be like a game-breakingly good opener, even if you do manage to do that. Like +4 coins is good, but it's not like mind-bendingly good unless you like really want to hit 6 or 7. You're probably not trying to hit 7 if you're opening Animal Fair, because Inheritance isn't very good. Maybe if you want Forge or something, I don't know. But you know, there's definitely times when you'd want to be able to spike 6. So, I mean, even if you just want to hit 5, it's certainly very good at doing that. So, you know, I mean, that's it's just a little overkill for hitting 5. But I mean, depending on what your options are, you know, your next best option might be silver, right? And that Animal Fair is certainly going to be much more effective than silver. Especially because you would be thinning a card, or at least not increasing your deck size as well. So yeah, I mean, if you can manage to open Animal Fair, I think it'll be quite strong. Sheepdog as an opener, I could see it with, like, you know, something like Workshop, but it's a little risky, obviously. So are there any? Let's see. I mean, if you don't have an expectation of activating the reaction, there's no way you open with this. But you know, aside from something like Workshop, I could see, like, you know, for instance, well, actually, for the most part, drawing cards in reaction to buying something is not particularly exciting. But on the first shuffle specifically, it can be nice to just like get a clean shuffle after turn 4. So I could also see, like, you know, if you have an expectation that you're going to be using Sheepdog anyway, you pick it up in the opening, you buy something, you react with Sheepdog. Like, this is assuming that you get terminal collision, because otherwise you would just play it. But yeah, I don't know. I think in general in the opening, it's not going to be very exciting. Snowy Village has a lot of potential early. I don't really. I mean, it doesn't do much when you in the opening unless you want to buy like really cheap cards because of the plus buy. So it's a card you want to get early, but not necessarily a card you want to open with. Like as an opener, it's basically a cantrip, barring like, I don't know, pouch or some other specific situations like that where you could actually open with Snowy Village and multiple terminals. But it'll be a strong card early. Anyway, okay, so then the last card, Barge, either now or 5-cost action duration, either now or at the start of your next turn, +3 cards and +1 buy. So this card obviously has a lot of similarities to both Margrave and to Wharf. I think it's worse than both of those cards, but I think that's not like a big knock against it, because those are both really good cards. I think this card is quite strong. I think it's one of the better Smithy variants, 5-cost Smithy variants out there. I mean, so basically, I think most of the time, you're playing this as a non-duration. It does not stay out if you activate the effect on the current turn. And then you load up on the duration version of it, you know, when you have like overdraw or that you don't, you know, need to take advantage of or what have you. Or you don't need the plus buy this turn. And in that respect, I mean, it's nice because unlike other duration draw, it doesn't have to skip turns, right? So if you have 5 of these, you know, you can potentially just be playing 4 of them every turn, and then or maybe 3 of them every turn and 1 of them every other turn, or something along those lines, where you know, you get both the reliability of having the duration effect, but also the sort of volume of effect of being able to play it every turn rather than every other turn. And obviously just the flexibility of being able to decide, you know, as it comes up, like, do I need the draw now, or can I, you know, do I not need it? You know, should I just defer it to next turn till next turn is really nice. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a really good card. Probably the most straightforwardly good card in this set of 5. I don't necessarily mean to say that it's the best card of the 5, although it might be. But it's like it's going to be the most, like I said, the most straightforward one to play with. It's a, I mean, it, you know, in order to really be good, it's going to need village support, of course. But you know, as a even on a board with no village support, you know, this would be a great terminal of choice where you just get 2 of them and you just use them for the duration draw every time. The plus buy, you know, makes a huge difference there. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a great card, and as an opener, it's, I guess you will have control over whether it misses your shuffle, generally speaking, or at least as much control as you do with anything else. So in that respect, it might be a little bit better than your typical Smithy variant. Not to mention the plus buy. you know, obviously can be good as well. But I mean, in general, I don't see this being like a super strong opener for the most part. But certainly a card that you're gonna want to invest in like pretty early in the game. All right, well, I think that will do it for now. As I said at the beginning, there will be previews the next, I think, 4 days after this. So yeah, if you're, like I said, if you're interested, go check them out on the Dominion client. You can queue up for matches that are guaranteed to allow you to play with the preview cards. And I think the expansion itself drops in a couple of weeks. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, until tomorrow.